I've made no secret that I believe Attack on Titan's writing and storytelling is nothing short of brilliant. So this video going deep into how the writers have actually been showing you exactly what is going to happen is probably not surprising. I am so certain that this is the case that I will also provide a theory based on the things we've been shown as to what's going to happen next. Before we begin, I have not read the manga and I don't plan on for the time being, so please let's keep the comment section clear of those, but there will of course be massive spoilers for the final season of the anime. Without further ado, let's go. So what exactly do I mean by the writers showing you what's going to happen? There's one thing that I want you to remember when talking about Attack on Titan. Nothing you hear or see is throwaway information. All of it can be followed through, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. All the way through Season 4 so far, the show has been reminding you in subtle, and not so subtle ways, of what is going on in this world. The season starts off with us on the other side of the ocean, showcasing what we're going to be up against. Right away, we see that the Marleyan forces leverage the power of the Titans to the fullest extent. We are then shown a flying airship coming in to deliver another devastating blow. Again, remember that these scenes have a very clear purpose of reminding you what exists in this world. We'll come back to this one a little bit later. Then, the final major part of the first episode. We are once again shown the power of the Beast Titan. The power to transform Eldians into Titans at will. After Reiner and Zeke land, they tear the place apart and then the Beast uses his insane accuracy to wipe out the remaining fleet. But before that happens, the armor jumps in to take the flurry of cannon shells to protect Zeke. This scene reminds us that the Beast isn't really meant for frontline combat, but is intended as a supporting role, while Reiner can take this blow and still recover without too much hassle. This also functions as a reminder that the shifter bodies can be blown to smithereens, yet still recover. And the outro of episode 1 of course shows us that the Paradise Island has already infiltrated Marley. Episode 2 starts with a meeting between the Marleyan army generals and the warriors. Zeke wants to propose a plan to resume the invasion on Paradise Island, but isn't really taken seriously. We also learn that Zeke only has a year left due to the 13-year curse, and that he has royal blood. While this may have seemed like a not too important meeting, this shows us that Zeke is willing to do everything in his power to get back to Paradise with or without the military support, because he knows that Colts won't inherit his abilities as the Beast. Just like the airship in episode 1, keep this in mind for later. There are a lot of scenes foreshadowing how the Tybur family will gain control over the military, but I think that was pretty obvious, so I won't get into that too much. We are, however, shown that Reiner is being tormented by a lot of what happened on Paradise, emphasizing the theme of this season and the series overall. Violence simply leads to more violence, and no one is really a victor from a war. Finally, episode 2 ends with a meeting between the warriors. Two major things happen here. We learn that Zeke is banking on obtaining the Founding Titan at all costs, which will explain a lot of events later on. And secondly, we are introduced to the Warhammer Titan, which at the time raised major red flags for me. Traditionally, you wouldn't introduce a new major character in the final arc of a series, which of course proved exactly right, but just like with everything else so far, just keep that in mind for now. And the final thing before we move on, I believe Gabby and Falco will function as the Eren, Mikasa, and Armin of the final season, to establish this full circle storyline. The series began with our main characters being terrified of the outside world and wanting to kill all of their enemies, just like Falco and Gabby do now, but I believe that with time, they'll figure out that the people on Paradise are just like them, and that they are not the devils that they've been portrayed as. This has already started for Falco when he meets Eren, but again, all set up so far. Episode 3 starts with a flashback to the warriors training of Reiner and the rest of the shifters. And in case you forgot, they remind you of Annie, the female Titan still encased in the crystal since Season 1 on Paradise. We are then shown all of the shifters' abilities one by one. Most importantly, reminding you of the Colossal's ability to nuke everything like he did in Season 3. Episode 3 ends with Falco's meeting with Eren, and the parallels here are just nuts. Firstly, just in case they had not hammered home the duality of Eren and Reiner enough, they are literally on the opposite sides of a wall, and Falco is between them. And secondly, the dialogue pretty much describes both Eren and Reiner. They both thought that they have no other choice but to destroy the other side simply to survive. These are pretty on the nose, however, so I don't think it's worth getting into this too much for the purposes of this video. Episode 4 was mostly focused on setting up the Tybur war declaration and Magath being put into charge of the military, so there's not too much to draw from that, as we were essentially told that was going to happen anyway. The post-credits scene, however, will obviously have massive implications, so let's get on to that. Episode 5 is the big one where we start getting some payoffs. The biggest thing for this episode is that we get an insight into Eren's and Reiner's thought process. Instead of the bombastic fights between them that we've seen so far, they simply sit down and talk, once again emphasizing the duality of these characters, with Falco still standing right in between them. In the conversation, however, Reiner is the one that has been completely caught off guard, just like Eren was back in Season 2, who is now as unfazed as can be. While this is going on, Willy delivers his speech, which just has way too many small details to talk about. We are reminded of the Titans within the walls, the very reason why they wish to capture Eren, who holds the founding Titan. We're further shown Willy's plan to re-establish the military with the Spawn as its commander, with all the higher-up military being sat closely together for Eren's initial strike. And of course, we see all the shifters captured, showing that Marley has been infiltrated by quite a lot of Paradise Island forces. During this conversation, we are pretty much told that much of Eren's mission was him going in solo, as the letters he sent are what got the rest of his allies on board. The conversation continues with Eren once again hammering home that the very idea of the other side is purely subjective. But even Eren says that he realizes that the people here are just the same. He's eaten the same food, walked the same streets, and so on. I'll keep repeating myself, but remember once again that none of this is a throwaway line. The reason Falco was told to stay is that he needs to hear this, as I believe the story is meant to go full circle. We then get a line that I believe will dictate the rest of the series. I will keep moving forward until I exterminate my enemy. So far, Eren's only mission is to defeat his enemies beyond the wall. Season 3 ends with him saying that if he kills all his enemies on the other side of the ocean, they may finally be free. Based on this, I assume that his plan is to gain full control over the founding Titan and free the Titans within the wall to wipe out the rest of the world, as in his view, if there's no one beyond the walls, nothing can ever harm the people he cares about, the people on Paradise. But it's with episode 6 we can properly get into all of the payoffs that have been set up by the writers so far. And believe me, there are a lot. In the flashback of Willy's and Magath's conversation, we are once again shown that there are spies in the midst. After the intro cinematic, we see the reveal of the Warhammer Titan, who gets pummeled by Eren right away. Now remember what I said about introducing a new major character during the very last chapter of a series. This is not traditionally done unless it is required as a story device, which I strongly believe it already has and will continue to be. Firstly, it demonstrates us just how much this time skip has changed Eren and the rest of Paradise forces. Eren has gone from the blind, rage-fueled rush to a cold and calculated fighter. And secondly, I'm fairly certain that Eren will need the power of the Warhammer for some sort of specific issue later on, as he defeats it with essentially little to no trouble, which just proves that the scope of this new character was very narrow to begin with, besides showing us the transformation of our cast. This is the first major detail that could be drawn from purely from story writing perspective. Then, there's an interesting scene between everyone's favorite potato lady and Gabby, who is spared by her. This is the most obvious foreshadowing you can do, with the theme of the season being that violence leads to violence and war in general. Sasha sparing Gabby will almost certainly come to haunt her later on, whether it's Gabby killing a character close to her or Sasha herself. A thing that we saw come into fruition the very next episode are the lights set up our main gang. That is the airship part I wanted you to keep in mind from episode 1. And finally, the Warhammer's protective encasing. This is another reveal that was way too perfect not to be taken advantage of. This will of course develop further in the next episode, but it was quite obvious that Eren wouldn't be able to get through the shell right away. But then Porco, the Jaw Titan, shows up behind him. which of course is the perfect thing to get through it. The last shot of episode 6 essentially establishes that the forces of Paradise are hardened veteran fighters, while the warriors, with the exception of Zeke and Reiner, are honestly, for a lack of a better word, pretty wimpy. But now, let's move on to episode 7, the latest at the time of writing. Going into this episode, we still have a few reveals yet to come, and it's also important to remember that we knew that the rest of the warriors were also on their way. For reveals, we're missing the Beast, the Cart, the Armored, and for our friendly side, the Colossal. The first shot of episode 7 gives us pretty much all of them right away. This is where the first major detail comes in. This shot of Levi checking his watch and the Beast telling him that he is running out of time. Keep this in mind for when we get to the carrying this way of thinking forward. The next major reveal is of course Armin's nuke, which we were conveniently reminded of. Then the airship comes in, a technology that we hadn't really seen that many times, so we were once again reminded of it in episode 1, when the Marleyan forces used it in their initial attack. Also, keep this guy in mind. After that, just as predicted, Eren uses the Jaw Titan to break open the Warhammer, and that's essentially the end of that. The final scene of the episode shows Reiner transforming, stopping Eren just in time from getting the Jaw. And so far, that is all we know. Now you may say that with hindsight, seeing these patterns is pretty simple. And I'd agree, if I hadn't predicted every single thing that happened in episode 7. Obviously, I have no way of proving it, as I only told about my theory to one friend. But since I'm pretty confident in my predictions, why don't I theorize what's going to happen from now on? The Beast Titan told Levi he's running out of time. This leads me to believe that either Zeke has made contact with Eren and is in cahoots with him, or that he has made contact, made a deal to be defeated, and will use this fake capturing to infiltrate Paradise himself. Just like he mentioned back in the meeting, he only has a year left and he wants to complete his mission. Now you may say that this is a small detail to latch onto, but Levi killing him with a single blow seems just too perfect. And you may also say that he did obliterate the whole plaza with the rocks, but if they're trying to make this capture seem real, that's what it would take. Next up, the pilot of the airship. He's a new character, and he's wearing a Marleyan uniform. He appears to be on our side, and he doesn't seem to be wearing it to go undercover, as he is the main pilot of this airship. Now if you recall, in episode 1, we were told that no ships sent to Paradise returned. Obviously some were simply destroyed, but this leads me to believe that some of the Marleyan forces could have switched sides, and that there is another insider in Marley. This would explain how the assault could have been planned so meticulously, as Eren wouldn't have been able to do so much recon all by himself, and how they managed to smuggle in even more of Paradise forces. Basically, I'm almost certain that we're going to get an in-depth explanation of how Eren managed to come here solo with little to no previous knowledge of how the outside world even works. Keep in mind, he only found out that anything beyond the wall exists just 4 years ago, and this explanation will come from someone from Marley joining Paradise, whether it's because Zeke or someone else. Returning to the final scene of episode 7, Reiner showing up. I believe he won't pose much of a threat, and will mostly function as a chasing force for our main characters to escape. We've already seen most of the big events go down, so him joining the battle this late doesn't make a lot of sense from the plot perspective. And lastly, a more long-term prediction. Eren's story has always been to wipe out all of his enemies so that the people of Paradise are safe. This has been repeated time after time, even in Season 4. From what we've seen, Mikasa's ultimate mission is to protect Eren. So let's draw from what I've predicted so far. Eren gets Zeke, thus having access to royal blood. He then draws his trump card. He activates the Titans within the walls and can finally reach his ideal world of Paradise being safe, simply because there is literally no one else left to harm it. But ultimately, it will be Mikasa who will stop him, after realizing that the only one Eren needs protection from is himself. By this point, I also wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the main villains, or I guess the forces of Paradise for that matter, have switched sides and are all working together to stop Eren, as destroying the world is just a bad idea no matter how you look at it. The one thing that I can't quite figure out is when the female Titan will come into play, as we've been reminded of her multiple times, but not really had anything to go off of. Hello, this is Korotos from the future jumping in. This is absolutely unscripted, but while editing this video, I noticed that literally one of the first scenes of episode 1 is Eren seeing his mother torn apart, aka seeing the future. So I'm pretty sure that that is going to come into play as well, as it's again something that we got reminded of back in season 3 with Grisha and Eren's father. Obviously I don't know how it will work in context, but it is something to keep in mind. Eren's future seeing ability will for sure come back into play. And those are my predictions. I'm in no means a writer or anything, but I'm just drawing from some basic assumptions of how usual storytelling works. If all of these turn out to be wrong, good. I'll be just as happy as if they were correct. This is the exact reason why I enjoy shows like Attack on Titan. The writers are constantly leaving clues that you can pick up on and start piecing the puzzle together. And I love this process so much. Even if everything I believe is wrong, it's all a part of the fun. But if any of these do turn out to be correct and you've read the manga, again, please hold off spoiling anything. I guess it will be fun looking back at these in a few weeks. But other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.